Hey, we're live. Welcome, everyone. So for everyone that's tuning in after the video, before I brought on my friend Dan, and I'll kind of let him introduce himself a little bit. But yeah, I mentioned a little while ago, we're going to be doing mock interviews for front-end developers. So if you're interested in that, we'll have more information on it. But yeah, Dan's here today. Oh my God, there's going to be an echo. A little bit. Stop it. All right. So Dan's here today. He's I know a lot of people have interview questions. We're going to be talking about how to do well in interviews. I'll probably poke him a little bit and see what he can help with, because he actually was someone that interviewed me for my second position. So I think he's a lot of good advice. But yeah, I'm going to stop talking. How's it going, Dan?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm super happy to be here. Happy to be taking questions from everybody. Yeah, like you said, with my background, where we actually know each other is this company called Albert, where I was the front end lead. So I got a lot of hands-on experience, not only interviewing folks, but also thinking about it from the interviewer's perspective and putting together those questions, that sort of thing. So I'm excited to share the knowledge that I've gained over the years.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you've given me a lot of good advice. One thing I missed when I quit Albert, I just like kind of talking back and forth with different conventions. I think we had a lot of fun conversations with that. And then when I went to Catalytic, I don't know, there were a lot of kind people, but they were so busy. There were a lot of remote people, and what people would do is they'd go AFK and Slack and stuff like that. They just wanted to focus. They had their idle timers, or they had it so it would lock out and they wouldn't receive questions for the next hour, which I didn't know about. But I didn't get to talk to a whole lot of people at Catalytic. I missed that at Albert.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting because even that was one of my favorite things of being in the office, just being like, hey, how does this work, or how should we style this sort of thing? Having those one-off discussions is definitely something that I just miss now that I've been working from home for over a year. It still happens. I mean, you can still make time for it though. If you really try, it might mean starting a hangout or a meeting, or even just DMing someone and being like, what do you think about this convention? But yeah, I definitely do miss that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you do have to go out of your way a little bit and maybe be a little bit more proactive, but you can do it. But I'm not going to go into that. But hey, Hologram, how's it going? Welcome back, buddy. So like I said, it's going to take about 5 minutes for people to start coming in. Anyone that's coming in, feel free to ask us questions. We'd love to answer interview-based questions. If people are if they have interviews coming up, or they got stuck on a take-home project, or you want advice on how to actually prepare for interviews, Dan's the guy to ask. That's why I brought him on. But I actually want to ask you, how is Coinbase going, your new position?
Yeah, so I just wrapped up the third week at Coinbase. I'm going to be a senior software engineer there. So yeah, just for a bit of context, I've been doing mostly front-end development for the last 5-6 years. And I'm going to continue doing front-end stuff at Coinbase, but it's actually going to be more focused on React Native, which I have some experience with, but not a whole lot. So it's going to be, I think, just super fun, learning, continuing to work in React, which I'm familiar with, but in a new context, because you don't have the DOM in React Native. So I'm excited to learn. And also onboarding at Coinbase has really kind of it's honestly, I feel like the gold standard. I feel like now I know how, if I ever, I don't know, in 10 years have my own company, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, that was really thorough, really thoughtful, a 3-week period to learn all the ins and outs of the different teams and everything. Which, especially being remote, I just, I can't thank them enough for having such a thorough process. But now that onboarding's over, actually starting on Monday, I get to go and work on my team. So
that's awesome.
We'll see if I actually learned anything.
You'll have to let me know. Yeah, React Native's definitely something a little bit different. I'm sure you'll pick it up very fast. Andrew, how's it going? Welcome. What was I going to ask? Oh, you mentioned if you ever own your own company, are you like down the road? Is that like a future goal of yours, like 10 years down the road?
I want to, like, I'm definitely open to it. And not necessarily because of any specific idea that I have. I don't know. I've always been very interested in like worker owned co-ops. And I feel like it would be interesting to try and get a software company as a worker owned co-op up and running.
Wait,
So
sorry, what's a worker owned co-op?
So basically, the idea would be that every employee, after a certain amount of time working there, they would become like a co-owner, um, and that's an idea that I kind of want to explore. But I mean, it's honestly like where the wind takes me at this point. I definitely don't, I've got no immediate plans for anything like that, but I would like to try like a different structure of working at some point in the future.
Interesting. Hey, James. Hey, Ryan. How's it going? Technical founder style. I think he's asking you that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so yeah, like primarily a developer these days, but I do have a bit of a background in product and design as well. So, um, yeah, I think I'm kind of like well suited to try and start something. So, in the future, maybe I'll give it a shot. But yeah, for now, just focusing on what's next, which is the new gig at Coinbase.
Nice. Andrew has a question for you.
Cool. Yeah. So, what was the interview process for Coinbase? I think pretty standard with like the bigger companies that I've talked to, and with the exception actually of Amazon, which I interviewed with at one point. And yeah, so basically it was like a multi-step process of they actually, I think, kicked it off with more of a culture style interview where I actually talked to a recruiter who was extremely helpful and could answer a lot of my questions around like the culture and what it's like to work there. And I think on the flip side, she was kind of trying to gauge whether or not I was like the right culture fit for the company. And after that went well, had a couple interviews, had like a shorter interview that was more technical in nature, and then a longer, more like hands-on project. Which, applying for a React position, it was building something out in React. Which that's kind of my go-to in terms of what I want to be doing for a given position. Like, so how I mentioned like how it was a little bit different from like Amazon. With Amazon, I was applying for a front-end position and ended up having to like invert binary trees and do that sort of thing, which is just like, why am I like, I'm never going to do this in my day-to-day. Like, you're not testing
At
me on what I'm
Amazon?
actually, yeah. Because like for a front end position, like I felt like I wasn't tested necessarily for like what I would actually be doing. But yeah, with Coinbase, it was, like culture, technical, hands-on React, and then meeting with the engineering managers and just talking about like what they're working on, seeing if it was a good fit for not only them, but for me as well.
Awesome. Well, definitely appreciate you giving that rundown. I'll actually just pop up questions as they come up, but and I'll pop them up on screen. You should be able to see them. Let me know if you can't. But Jim, I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Hologram has a question. What tips would you give for someone applying for tech jobs that has no degree and no experience in tech at all?
This one, so like two-parter. I would personally not care around the no degree part. I don't have a degree, not just like not in computer science, but I actually just didn't go to college at all. I was kind of like self-taught fully. So and also in my experience, like nobody's ever cared at all about that part. The experience part though is definitely like what tends to matter more. So that one is a little bit harder. I mean, like really in any interview, you're trying to prove to the company that you can do the job. And if we're being brutally honest, if you have no degree, that's fine. if you have no experience in tech at all, you are not qualified. Like, you have to have some experience in tech. There's no way around it. Like, nobody's going to be like, yeah, we'll hire you and teach you literally everything from the ground up. So I think the question is, what experience can you actually like bring to the table, whether that's anything that you've, like self-taught, personal projects that you've put together. You don't necessarily have to have experience in terms of a previous job. Obviously, everybody needs to get their first job, like in some way, shape, or form. So it's just, how do you prove what you know? So if you're looking for that first job, which, at Albert, we did hire a lot of like more junior folks, either fresh grads or like either first or second job out of boot camp. Just, show that you're passionate about the technology, but also show that you actually understand the technologies and the things that you're going to be working with. So you're applying for a React position, having a couple of projects, personal, that's fine. But that show that you understand like React and state management, that sort of thing is really important.
Awesome. Love it. Let me know when you want to break from answering questions. I think a lot of people are just going to appreciate you and just want to hear you talk and have me shut up. So I'm going to keep asking you, but like, feel free to push any of these on me.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you want to take some, absolutely. I'm definitely curious to see what you have to say about some of these things too.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I didn't know you didn't have a degree.
Yeah. I went from high school to food service to just getting super lucky and landing at a company that kind of opened the door for me. And that wasn't even a development job. It was, originally I was doing like UX research and like product strategy. I was just super into tech, and they were like, we see that and you seem hungry, so let's give you a shot.
How dare you go through life without technical or without debt like the rest of us? I posted a video of like CS degrees, and I basically said, you don't need a CS degree. Stop. Like, if you get a scholarship, if you have grants, if you have something to fund that, that's completely different. But I basically posted a video about, you don't need a CS degree to become a developer. And I get so many messages about how I'm like leading people down the wrong path. And here you are, just like many other developers I met, telling people, like you had interviews at Amazon and larger companies. Coinbase is a really big company as well. But I don't know. Like, I actually like your story. I had no idea you didn't have a degree. I actually figured you did just because of how smart you were. But yeah, I think that's going to be encouraging to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's really going the college route is a route, but with the amount of knowledge or, information that's available out there these days, you can fully teach yourself, but then that also takes a certain kind of person. Like, some people aren't good at self-teaching. Some people aren't good at doing school, especially not for something like, a 4-year program. But maybe a boot camp works. So it's kind of like figuring out what works for you. Yeah. But I think for me, like the big driver, the thing that actually got me to the point where I am now is that I'm incredibly passionate about technology. So like I just kept wanting to learn and learn and learn, and I still do. So yeah, which is probably why sometimes it seems like maybe I studied this, because in a way I have been studying it like for the last 8 years at this point.
Well, I mean, your knowledge, I can honestly say, passes a lot of other people that I met that had CS degrees. And it's just because of how excited tech gets you. Like, every time I talk to you, and that's one thing I missed about Albert, and, some of the people at Catalytic, I think, had been there for so long. They're just like so into their work. But sometimes it was fun talking to you at Albert and just like picking your brain, and because you'd always get excited about it. Like, it didn't really matter what challenge I brought to you. You're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Let's figure it out. And like, you would even like, I kind of felt bad sometimes because you would stop in the middle of whatever you were doing. You're like, oh yeah, let's go over to your computer. I'm like, I probably should have like messaged him on Slack or something like that. But you're always excited about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. For what it's worth, I always felt like I worked better with interruptions. So those things to break up my day were always appreciated.
Oh, okay. That's really good to hear. That makes me feel better. James May Slam, welcome. And we'll definitely get to everyone's questions. We'll pop up James. Yes, regarding for someone that is self-taught, how can they get ready for an interview in a world where CS degrees are favored with API algorithms not being known? Do you think they're favored?
I mean, it definitely depends on the position and the company. You know, for front end positions, in my experience, they're not asking you algo questions most of the time. There's obviously the odd exception, but like for the most part, it's not really about like actual like, you know, implement like quicksort or something like that. But for maybe like a more back-end position, you might start to get more into the algo side of things. But let's like pick apart this question. So for someone that's self-taught, getting ready for an interview in a world where CS degrees are favored. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious because there's a lot going on here. So, like I said, like does it matter that you have a CS degree or not? Like it might to the company, but at that point, like you know, you can kind of self-select companies that don't really care about that. And then if you're being tested on something that you don't know, that's a problem, and that's just not going to go well. Just that would be like me, and you know, asking in a world where people are asking front end questions, like what can I do if I don't know front end? It's like, ooh, not a whole lot. Study like.
Yeah.
If you want a quick answer for this one, study and then go apply what you studied on like LeetCode or like HackerRank or any of those websites. Which, by the way, is what I did for like I knew that the Amazon interview was going to be algo heavy, and having mostly done front end, like you know, prior to going through this experience of knowing that I was going to have this interview, I didn't know how to invert a binary tree, so I learned. And then I studied, and then I did decently okay at the Amazon interview.
Where do you learn it?
So I'm kind of weird in that I actually like learning on YouTube. I know that a lot of folks, I don't know if that's so weird these days, but I know a lot of folks that are like, I can't like learn from videos. I consume video content like all the time, and it's one of my preferred ways of learning. So just like on YouTube, like search some of these types of questions, and then went and applied it on HackerRank.
I love it. And Cracking the Coding Interview is a very common book, especially if you're applying for a FANG company. LeetCode, Code Wars. Have you ever used Code Wars? I don't know if you mentioned that.
No, I haven't used Code Wars.
Okay, basically you just rank up or you rank down. I think you start at like rank 7 or 8, and then you continue to complete challenges until you rank down and down and down. And you just typically will tackle problems around your rank and continue progressively getting better with algorithm type problems. But yeah, there's so much information to learn this data structures in general. I feel like because that's a really tricky thing to learn. I almost feel like that's the portion of knowledge when people think CS degrees, it's like, I don't know data structures and algorithms. I think that's like the part that seems scary that they can't learn on their own. And that's just, it's not true at all. Like, I think just people get intimidated by it, but there are so many free websites to learn. But my personal recommendation that helped me, because I'm someone that struggled so much. Like I bombed, a lot of my questions at Full Stack Academy. I did horrible on it, but I realized like I really had to understand like fundamental data structures first before I tackled tricky algorithms. And I would implement the data structure, implement functions on top of a class to interact with it and move around with it. So I don't know. I feel like just knowing what data structures exist and focusing on those first before you start tackling algorithms. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to think of a path forward to learn it, but I feel like I struggled because I didn't understand those fundamentals first. It's a tricky thing to learn.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're totally right. You kind of do have to the algorithms are applied to the data structure, so like that is often where it makes more sense to start. Also, yeah, I mean, I just want to let everybody know. So like I'm primarily a JavaScript guy, so when I talk about like programming, it will mostly be around JavaScript. But like for me, like learning something like how do linked lists work, I could do something where I would first like read about like what they are and then go implement it in JavaScript like as a class thing. So like trying to like replicate the thing, a lot of times led me to more, deeply understand it.
I think that's a fantastic strategy. Welcome, Julson. All right, May asks, thanks for being patient. Like I said, we'll get to everyone's questions, but if you have a question about interviews, web development related, feel free to ask. It is a live Q&A. How hard is it to get into a startup? Is it easier or just depends?
Yeah, do you want to take this one first?
I think it's a lot easier to get into a startup. But like, I'm thinking of like a mid to late stage startup. I think early startups typically, I don't know. Like I found a lot of them wanted to hire senior engineers. They wanted to hire someone that could take charge of the project, where when you have like a startup with 100 people, they had more resources to provide like a path for junior developers to grow. They had more staff to kind of help out with that. So like really early stage, it depends on their funding, but I think you're better with like mid to late stage startups, much easier than early stage startups and like big companies, big FANG companies, even just bigger corporations in general, not just FANG. Those are my thoughts, and that's my experience. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the first part. So I think, especially for self-taught folks, there is something that I kind of want to bring up regarding internships in a little bit. But if you're self-taught or if you went the bootcamp route, I think a early to mid stage startup is probably going to be more open to taking on like less proven talent, let's say. And a lot of times that's just because, they need folks that can just like come in and start like executing and thinking about things like, these like long-term roadmaps that maybe like a more senior person would be able to think about, like, is less necessary because they're just trying to get the thing done. And yeah, I think in terms of like bigger companies for self-taught folks with less experience, I've never really talked to somebody about this and like confirmed this, but I have a hunch that that's almost like a non-starter in most cases. But I would say that the exception, I think, for folks that have yet to like land that first job is actually like folks that have gone to school and have done internships. Because a lot of times I've seen every company that I've worked at has basically like had some sort of internship program where we actually try to hire the people, as soon as they graduate. So going back to what we were saying earlier about, CS degrees not necessarily being like super necessary, they do have like benefits like that, where like you're just networking while you're in school. But for somebody who's self-taught, I would personally recommend going for those like early to mid stage startups.
Okay. All right. Really cool. So you were, just to clarify, you were saying early stage startups were a little bit less friendly towards newer developers, especially self-taught, right?
So I actually don't know like early stage, but like in the early to mid range. So like if we have early here, let me make sure that my hands are in view. So like you have early age and like here's mid stage, like super early stage, maybe not, but like closer to mid. Once they've kind of like built the foundations, I don't think a startup is gonna like, bring in very fresh folks to like build that foundation. But like once the foundation's there, then it's maybe not going to be that difficult for them to like take on a more junior dev, because they likely have like a resource or two that can help out. And also like you're kind of just working within established patterns rather than like having to, build all that stuff from scratch yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. Slam says, advice for communicating while you're whiteboarding. I know it can be hard to do both at the same time. That's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is something that I've personally heard a lot of folks like struggle with, is that like whiteboarding interview. And I think that the first piece of advice that comes to mind is practice. And that means like just do more interviews if you can. Like you get better at it with time. I mean, being on the spot, it's almost like public speaking, right? Like it's super difficult the first time, but once you do it enough, it starts to feel more natural. So get practice if you can. And also just kind of like pay attention to like how you're talking and like what you're actually like putting up there on the screen. I think that it's easy sometimes to like start getting tripped up because you're trying to like do too many things at once and your brain's just kind of like scrambling. If you realize that maybe you're being a little bit less like coherent or just like racing, just like take a step back and just be like, like maybe like let them know that you're just going to take a pause, think, like compose your thoughts a little bit, and then keep going. But yeah, I think more than anything, the thing that helps is practice. So either do interviews, or yeah, maybe just practice like at home, like, or have somebody there that can like put that pressure on you to like, because it's so much easier to do these things like if you're by yourself, but like maybe talk to a friend and just be like, here, like let's do some whiteboard problems together and like get that practice in.
Yeah. And so, a lot of people are struggling to find interviews. So I think I really like that you added just practice at home. I remember like years ago, or it was after Full Stack Academy, I still have an old video. I'm not letting anyone see it. It's private, but I would do whiteboard interviews on stream and I would try to solve them. I thought a lot of people were just going to like tell me, I'm not doing a good job, but I found that if people post videos like that, I know it's like really intimidating, but I think a lot of it's like practicing public speaking and being comfortable being judged also. I found that when you participate in a program like 100 Days of Code or other challenges like that, you posting videos and just saying, hey, I'm going to practice this. I know it's probably going to be pretty bad, but please give me feedback. Like so many people were encouraging with it. Like just putting yourself out there in ways like that. Even so, like maybe starting with a whiteboard at home, do it with a friend, do it with family. And then if you're bold enough, like just practice it at a program like that, and kind of put yourself out there. Whenever I say that, everyone gets like super intimidated. They're like, I don't want to be, in front of all these people on the internet, and I don't want them to see. I think a lot of people fear like, oh my God, people are going to see how bad I am, how unintelligent I am. And like, no one is ever thinking that. They're like, this person's awesome for streaming this. I wish I had the guts to do this. And like I think a lot more people are encouraging than you think. But Marco, welcome. JM, welcome. How you guys doing? All right. So we got another question. I'm going to pause here though. For anyone watching, I think I set this up correctly. I just want to let you know two things. Dan, my friend here, who you see to the right of me, he's actually offering to help someone through a mock front-end interview. So if you're someone that's a little bit nervous, you're trying to get better, you just want to experience it, we're going to be hosting front-end mock interviews. I actually looked at the project that he built just for this. It's really cool. Just going to give it away. It has to do with Pokemon, but like it's actually a really fun project. It's something that you would probably see as like a final challenge with like a coding boot camp or something like that. I think it's a fun interview, but if you're interested, just DM me on LinkedIn. We'll set it up, but we are offering that, and I'll mention it later as well. And then one more thing. Starting April 12th, we're doing a 30-day coding challenge. Join our Discord server, DM me, we'll get you started. We have a lot of people joining so far, but it's actually to pull people out of tutorial hell, get them focused on working on projects. Really excited about it. Even in the channel so far, tons of people are just like, I don't know, that it feels wholesome. They're just encouraging each other to come up with really cool projects to work on. And we even have people that are just learning HTML and CSS now. So it's very beginner friendly, but if you're interested in that, those are the two ways you can get involved with that. Yeah, there's no command for Discord. I'm not that prepared. So the link's there. It's in my bio. Go to DonTheDeveloper.tv and just contact me if you have any questions. But yeah. All right. Let's see. Jay. Oh no, here's a question. What is for you the most algorithm-related topics used in software engineering position interviews? Are you asking like what specific problems, or like what algorithms around like what certain data structures usually are tested in the interview? I don't know. Do you know what he's asking?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. It could be, yeah, like either of the things you mentioned. I
Juleson, can
think,
you elaborate on that? We can come back to it unless you definitely have something to say.
yeah, no, let's come back to it after we get some clarification.
Sounds good. Use Pramp. What's Pramp? Some mock-in interviews. I have no idea what Pramp is.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, so I'm looking at it right now. It seems to be a platform where you can just do mock interviews.
Oh, that's
It's a
awesome.
free online peer-to-peer platform for practicing technical interviews. So yeah, that
Ooh,
sounds like a
peer-to-peer.
pretty good suggestion. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I love it. JMS. And we'll mention the Discord and the mock interviews down the road. Yeah, I'm on YouTube. YouTube.com/DonTheDeveloper. But JMS, I'm not sure if anyone else has asked, but when do you know you're ready to start applying for jobs?
This is a really good question. And I feel like in my career as a developer, I don't think I ever I don't think I could actually answer this. But what I think is that if you know other devs that are maybe a little bit more established, like mid to senior, they might be able to like be a good judge. So yeah, that's my only thought here. Also, just start applying for jobs. That's what I did. I eventually got in and it worked for me. I think we are all, I'll speak for myself. I think oftentimes I think that I'm not qualified for something for way longer than I should. And I think that if I would have just tried sooner, it would have paid off. So I definitely encourage you to apply because, hey, if you nail the interview, well, if you don't, it's good practice. And if you do, you're in. So there's almost no reason not to try.
Yeah, so you're definitely senior level in terms of front end. Did you just say did you try to direct people that they should ask someone more like mid to senior level than you?
No, I'm just saying if you know somebody that's
Oh,
a
okay.
developer, show them what you know and then get their thoughts. Cause this is almost how do you know you're ready for something when you're not that experienced? Like that's a hard call to make objectively. But I feel like as when I was getting started in development, I think I definitely had a lot of friends that had already worked in the field for multiple years, and they would have been able to be more objective and also be real with me. Maybe they could identify things that I'm missing, and they could maybe point me in the right direction.
Yeah. Wonder if I want to dive in. Okay, so first, I thought that was an example of you just underestimating yourself. So that's why I was pointing it out, because Dan's a phenomenal developer. I've learned a lot from him. But more importantly, yeah, I think, I don't know if it's intimidation. I don't know if it's, so we have a question coming up about LinkedIn networking, and maybe that'll help. But I really want to encourage people to get connected with developer communities, especially while we're all remote. Meet other developers, meet other aspiring developers, meet other senior developers. I think people just need to get more comfortable talking with developers. A lot of these questions kind of get answered in these discussions over time in Discord servers and meetups and stuff like that. But yeah, really just connect with other developers. But I went a year and a half without applying. I think I had 5 portfolio projects, and I didn't apply for a year and a half. I think that was the biggest mistake in the world. I wish I would have applied after that first project. Because like you said, I personally bombed my first interview, but that gave me an idea of what was going to be tested. And what, just even getting more comfortable with being interviewed in the tech industry. Once I had that first experience, that just made me much more comfortable going down the road. And it took several interviews to get more and more comfortable, but I agree with you. Apply as early as possible. And Tess says it's really cool of them. I agree. I think she was talking about the mock interview, but I'm telling you, Dan, he's a super friendly interviewer. When we do those mock interviews, I remember being nervous because you interviewed me, and both you and Joe were really kind and encouraging about it. Because I always blank in interviews. That's just me. I still do it a little bit to this day, but I enjoyed my interview with you.
Good. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, no, we definitely tried to make it more like, we wanted to get a feel for how it would be like to work with you, not, show us your like rote knowledge. Yeah, it's like, you can learn if you don't know a specific technical thing, like you can learn it. So yeah, we were, definitely there to help. It's just more like, can you problem solve? Do you, and do you know like the basic amount of stuff that you need to know to actually be able to like do this job?
Just reading some of the questions. JM, what do you suggest are the best ways to network on LinkedIn? Do you have any advice for this one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
you don't post a lot on LinkedIn. I know that.
I don't. And like at a certain point, I almost wonder if it might be because like I've been doing this for so long that like I never really, like now it's just like recruiters like flooding my inbox, and I appreciate them all for it. Not like I'm serious. Like I always try to respond because like, they're trying to find talent too. And like recruiters are the reason that like I'm, in the position that I am right now with like the new job and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
like
so you got your new job with the recruiter.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like my whole thought there is just like, there's no reason to like keep doors closed. And yeah, I mean, I've talked to recruiters in the past where we actually like ended up like hanging out a few times, just talking about tech and like, like just meeting up over a beer and talking shop. Like they're just people like in the industry. So yeah, why not? But yeah, once in a while, somebody from a really cool company will hit you up, and yeah, if you're just like oh, recruiters are the worst. Like if you're that type of person, like some of those opportunities might not, come your way.
So I'm that person. I'm guilty of it, and I think your advice is actually pretty solid. I personally, I had some bad experiences with recruiters, but my experience does not resemble how your experience is going to be. So I think your advice is a lot better with that. The Martin, welcome. Uber, welcome. If I missed anyone, just say hello in chat. But here's where I start losing my place. There was a question. Oh yeah, James, thank you. Okay, this is a really good question. Someone in our Discord had asked, so we'll point him to this video if he can't be here today. But since junior level jobs for web developer is super saturated, would it be better to do Android or iOS development for junior level positions? I have a very strong opinion about this. So.
Okay. I don't. So let's hear your opinion. I'm super curious.
So I did an episode around Dev Mountain iOS, that program, and I got to talk with a lot of iOS engineers, which is really cool, and aspiring iOS engineers. There are not a lot of positions compared to web development. So I wouldn't say that you stand more of a chance because there just aren't nearly as many iOS or Android positions. So I would focus on what you enjoy, and that like your strengths with that and your passion for that is going to shine a lot more than you trying to like find the right market fit or like, the most marketable skill. Like, so this is the part I caution. Like a lot of people want to learn a language, a stack. They want to go into, software development or web development or mobile development based on what's going to get them a job. And I would be careful of that because every single path you choose, it's going to be a long journey. And most aspiring developers quit. Like I say, 90% of people that come to my meetup, they're never going to become developers. Like most people quit. It's a really hard journey and it's a long journey. And so I would figure out what you enjoy building. You're going to be much more marketable based on your passion projects, like the types of problems that you really love solving. That's going to show in the complexity of your applications and the effort that you put into learning that stack. That's my recommendation. Don't go off of, should I do iOS or web development? Figure out like what types of apps you want to build. That's my big recommendation for that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I definitely agree with that general mindset. Because like if you're passionate about, like, let's say iOS development, like you've got reasons to like go and learn that like deeply, you're probably gonna like stick with it. If you're just doing it, for more like practical reasons, that kind of like puts you at a disadvantage in terms, because it's a long road, like you mentioned. So like, yeah, unless you actually like care, it's going to be difficult, or it's going to be easier to fall off. And I want to say that this does beg the question that web developer jobs are or junior web developer jobs are super saturated, and like that there are a lot of junior folks like applying, and there's a lot of competition there. But I think that all that means is that like if you truly care about web dev and you get yourself to like that level of knowledge where you're just like a little bit above the rest, like it will be recognized. And while it may be true that the junior applicant pool is huge, because it is, because with so many folks being interested in web dev and all the boot camps and like the different ways to get in, at the same time there's a shortage of developers. So like, just because there's a lot of people applying doesn't mean that you can't learn it to a degree where folks will recognize that and be like, will you contribute to it like our company? Will you make us more money than we pay you? If so, yeah, like it's a no-brainer.
Wow. Like that's a bombshell. There are so many people applying for junior positions, but there's a shortage of developers. I think like just saying that, I can just imagine everyone that's been trying so hard to get a developer position. Like, why in the world would like that be true ever? And it's like, you hit it on the nose. So like if you put a little extra effort into what you're learning, you are going to stand out. And I completely agree. That's my experience. There's so many people where I give them so much advice that they never follow through with. It actually doesn't take a lot to be competitive versus all these other junior engineers. I think a lot of people underestimate their skills, and they feel like that little extra effort, even if it's just like putting effort into doing a little research into the company and applying that to your cover letter. Like most people don't do that. Like that's something little that you can add. Or just like, if you're trying to apply for front end, even being able to manage NPM packages and start up a node server, like something that little to take the extra step. Like if you're setting up React instead of using create React app, like if you take that extra step to learn like a basic Webpack configuration, that's huge. Do you know how many developers aren't willing to do that? Like you can take these little steps to make yourself so much more competitive, and then all this like extra saturation, it's not there anymore. You're ahead of these people. Yeah, man, that was actually a really good point. I want to say hello to, Eldrew, hello from Sydney. Wow,
Dang.
that's pretty far.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, welcome.
Hello from Denver.
Yeah, Denver, Colorado. I've definitely considered moving there.
It's beautiful. I was hiking earlier today. Like I kept just asking myself, I lived in Chicago for a while, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Chicago. I miss it to death, and I miss all my friends. But hiking like in the mountains, the sun was setting, and I was just like, why wasn't I living somewhere where I could just do this all the time? Sunshine is good, is all I have to say about that.
Absolutely. All right. So do you want to choose a question?
Yeah, let me see if I can scroll this.
Yeah.
I actually don't think I can.
You can't scroll?
I cannot.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, let's do a completely different question. There was one test. Yeah, it was yours. This is a really good question. How can you develop collaborative skills if you're self-taught?
This is a good question. I mean, I would say if you have like other, friends or acquaintances that are in the space, especially if they are, more on the junior side, like get together, come up with an idea, and keep each other accountable. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I've done in the past, is just like try to put together projects with friends. And I have a much better success rate in terms of like sticking with it if I'm, collaborating with someone. And what's interesting too here is that it's another one of those things where you have to practice, and it's like, how do you practice if you don't have like those folks around you? I know that there's a lot of communities online, even like the 30-day challenge thing that you're putting together. That's a space where, I could feasibly see somebody going to the group, you've got your communities, and just being like, does anybody want to collaborate? Like, it's the internet. Like, we can, we can communicate pretty easily these days. But yeah, I think finding folks that have like skills that complement yours is also important. So like, if I was like strictly developer and so were you, and we're like, let's build something, it's like, oh, maybe we're missing like a designer, but yeah, ultimately, just make things with people if you can. Yeah, I wonder if there's not an angle to that, like, so like contributing to open source, once you're able to, like, once you feel comfortable doing that, that's a form of like collaboration of itself. You have to like respond to like PRs and stuff, so it does like expose you a little bit.
I think so. The tricky thing, one thing so a lot of people that do collaborate, you gave really good advice for people to encouraging them to reach out on developer communities. And the one thing I'm just going to like really stress with that, emphasize, try to get comfortable with source control. Because I think one of the trickiest things about collaboration is not stepping on each other's toes and not overriding each other's code. And, source control allows you to do that. And like learning the fundamentals and basics of Git is really helpful. And it's not easy at first. And so, it might take some time, but if you're going to work on a project, I would highly recommend like, learning Git and using something like GitHub to collaborate on the project. I think that'd be really helpful and give you like actual experience that's going to translate into collaborating with real developers.
Yeah, and I also just want to add, like, so that it's such a good point that you bring up too, that like by building these collaborative things, and using tools like GitHub or GitLab, or choose your flavor, you get exposure to different parts of the actual like product development process. And I think a lot of times like we suffer from just assuming that like things like Git are just like known, but like we all had to learn it. We all had to learn how to read tickets, how to like break designs down into like the individual pieces, and like, yeah, just getting more and more exposure to that is super important. And I feel like, well, if I think about like, reaching out to an online community and being like, let's build something just to like get practice. Odds are that like, you're not going to get a project manager to like spec things out for you. So like you get exposed to like other parts of the product development process as well, which always looks good. Like if you have experience with like breaking down problems into like specs, like that's not necessarily development, but that's like a good skill to have. Like, oh, you know how to use like Trello or something? Like that's awesome. Yeah, I think like dropping those like little tidbits of, yes, I'm an engineer, but I also have done like these things that are a little bit outside of that scope. That, at least for me, that was always super helpful, because I could, going back to what I was saying earlier, like I started doing like UX and product strategy, and like that always kind of like hooked people, because it was like, oh, it's like you're not just a developer, but you can also like, think about like business problems. Like that's so cool.
That's
yeah.
huge.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really huge. a lot of your like mid to senior level positions get more comfortable with like figuring out the problem and writing the specs, writing the requirements. Like that usually becomes a responsibility at some point in your development career. A couple questions about the mock interview. Hologram, it's good to see that you finally joined our Discord. That's awesome. Yeah, because you've been coming back to these for some time now, so glad to have you. Regarding the mock interviews, how long of a time span do you think? It'll go for about an hour. We're going to schedule an hour and a half. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It'll be fun though. I like it.
Yeah. And so earlier you mentioned it being like this this specific project. I guess, yeah, I did want to bring up that it's going to be a little bit more than that. Like I actually do want to treat it as how we treated the interviews at my previous company, where we start with like some more cultural questions, some more just front end knowledge questions. So also it's going to be mostly a like React / front end interview, and then we're going to go into the project. So it's not just going to be like, let's make this. It's going to go throughout like through the whole process, kind of just in a shortened amount of time.
Absolutely. But yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn and message me. It gives me a chance to look through your profile, kind of look at your experience. I might even ask for a portfolio just to make sure like you kind of know enough for the interview, just so you're not overwhelmed or anything like that. So that's usually why I say message me on LinkedIn. And there was one other question. Oh, so this was answered already. And if we miss your question, feel free to ask it again. There's just a lot of questions. So, we might not get to everyone's question, but we're going to do our best. Are you using any UI frameworks in your mock interview? Yeah, React. If you want to consider that a UI framework. That's about as close. But yeah, because are you going to be looking for any CSS or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So as, it being a front end position, so the React is the only hard requirement. If you want to, style using classes and vanilla CSS, by all means, we're going to be using Code Sandbox, which lets you like install dependencies like super quickly. So if you want to go styled components or emotion or whatever, like totally up to you. But the only dependency is React.
Cool. All right, I'm going to catch up on just a couple quick answers. Formal, I don't think in the mock interview we're going to do anything about unit testing. I mean, unless you just like fly through everything, right? Let's see. I don't think we have anything prepared for that. And then you're welcome, Tess. Glad it was helpful. There was a question up here. Is about coding boot camps. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. Jason asks, any tips for mentally preparing for a boot camp? I'm starting at App Academy in June and haven't been in college for 5 years and a bit nervous about it. I'm going to start with my advice. Most people, when they ask this, I know you don't really know because you don't know what to expect, but like that's a part that you probably shouldn't care about. I would start what you can do to prepare for a coding bootcamp is just making sure that your schedule is free so you have the time allotted to be able to commit to it. Like that's probably going to be your hardest part. If you got approved with a good coding bootcamp that had a strict or rigorous application process, like you're already in, they kind of approved you. Sometimes you get a coding bootcamp that didn't do a good job of screening, but that very rarely happens, especially with a lot of higher rated coding bootcamps. So do the pre-work. A lot of people skip that. Don't skip it. Just honestly, like the best thing you can do with your coding bootcamp is just do what they tell you to do. Don't overwhelm yourself. If you are able to supplement that knowledge, get a feel for like the curriculum you're going to be learning, you can supplement here and there to feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But my big piece of advice is don't stress over it. Just ask them directly and just do what they tell you to do. They are going to give you the best advice for their coding bootcamp. I wish I could play this synthwave. I just want to play it as background music for my stream, but I can't do it in the studio. That's okay. I just hear it in my head. So you can't scroll. I'm just looking for like any different types of questions.
Which like What's happening? Why can't I scroll?
I don't know. That's really weird. I wonder if StreamYard you can scroll. Restream has had some bugs that I've encountered so far, so could be that. Oh, this is a good question. I feel like I should really get good at a few languages for now rather than spreading my knowledge out at the start. That sounds like you're already spreading your knowledge out at the start. What are your thoughts to that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I guess, well, okay, if we're talking about web development and we're talking about like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you consider that a few languages, no, definitely learn those three. That's very important. But if you're talking about like just programming this, I would personally recommend that you stick to one and learn it deeply before going on and learning other languages. So yeah, like if you're doing front end, just learn JavaScript first, then start exploring, or maybe like pick up TypeScript so you learn what types are like. But yeah, I think trying to learn multiple programming languages in the beginning is probably going to set you up for failure, because it's in my experience, at least, it was much easier to like understand the concepts while only applying them to one language.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, like, I don't know, in terms of like where to actually start, like, yeah, if it's web dev, I can't recommend JavaScript enough. If it's more backend, then it's kind of like, I guess, less important, the obvious players that folks suggest, like Python. Like it almost matters less which language it is, but just like learn it deeply.
I agree. All good advice. And David and Tunnel, welcome. Marco's giving you a little crap. You do not have big lakes in Colorado.
That's true, but we have mountains, and
ooh,
like I think if I remember correctly, like Illinois, like, so yeah, lived in Chicago before. Illinois is like the bottom 5 flattest states, and like that's just, I mean, it just gets kind of old. Also, love the Great Lakes, but they're just a little cold. And swimming in Lake Michigan is, I'll do it, but I don't want to get my like head underwater.
Yep. Yeah. Don't swallow the water.
Yeah, definitely not.
You'd see, I loved when I would run along the lake, you'd see people swimming. I always wanted to do that. But honestly, a thing that turned me off was like, those lakes are dirty. I'm just thinking, like, every time they put their head under and they would swim the whole way, I'm like, I'm going to swallow water at least once. I'm going to get super sick. I don't know. It's a dirty lake.
I do miss the beach though. Like just having that sand and being able to catch some sun. Oh man. We definitely don't have sand out here.
Don't have that either, Dan. I self-taught myself for 2 years. Currently, remote coding bootcamp is set up. Is it too late for me to shift to tech industry now that I'm nearing 40? What do you think about aspiring developers that are 40 and up?
Yeah, like I don't have like experience that would actually like let me answer this in like a objective way. But I personally don't think that there's no age that I can think of where suddenly you just can't learn. And I think that like grit and passion, if you have enough of those two things, you can definitely get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like, Juleson is already like on the way there, considering that they are doing they're currently in a remote coding bootcamp. Yeah, no, keep going. That's what I say.
You're doing everything you need to do. My third position at Catalytic, we had some older folks. That was the first time I worked on a team where a lot of people were older. Albert was younger. And my first position was a bit older. So worked with people that were 40. It just it didn't make a difference. Quite frankly, I don't know. I had a lot of kind people. I felt like, I don't know. I felt like just as you get older, your emotions get grounded. I almost felt like I just really enjoyed my time at Catalytic, where everyone was just like reasonable. They wanted to help each other out. They were all super kind. They wanted to learn. Sometimes when you get a startup and you invite like a lot of younger people, you get a lot of energy at the company. And sometimes that's what you need to bring a startup up. But sometimes you recruit people like fresh out of high school and like fresh out of college. And I don't know. I would almost like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think the first time that I worked with older folks, I felt like I had really constructive conversations with them. The energy was a bit different. But like I'm telling you right now, I've worked with startups where people are like fresh out of high school that weren't necessarily developers, but just a lot of people with a lot of passion and energy. And sometimes they would like, I don't know, sometimes that passion and energy can translate into like being too loud in meetings and being like kind of like talking over people and like not being willing to like take a step back. Maybe I'm just speaking from my own experience, but when I was younger, I had a lot of drive and ambition. And like, I learned a lot from the older folks that they kind of just stood back and they listened and they were willing to learn and pick up stuff. And they were just like grounded people. I always looked up to a lot of the older folks. That's my experience. So I like there is nothing in my mind. And I know my managers, all the managers I've had, they could care less about your age. Like it literally had nothing to do with your age. It's just like, did you want to learn? Were you open to learning? Were you really interested in this field? Did you have translatable skills? What was your experience like? Like age just never was a factor. Every time someone like asks that question, I feel like it's just like sometimes put into your head just because you're older, like you're gonna be like looked down on for some reason. I never got that feeling from any of my managers. That's my experience.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully I've been in a similar position where I feel like every company that I've worked at has not discriminated based on really like, anything, like definitely not based on like age, sex, race, any of that stuff. That's not to say that there's not companies that like, will whether they are doing it knowingly or not engage in like age discrimination. But thankfully there's, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like, can you do the job? Like, do you know enough to like do it? So it's like, okay, well, does age really play a factor there? No. So like, are you too old to learn? Like, I don't know. Are you passionate about web development? If so, keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you said, sometimes it happens. I think it's much rarer than you think it is. And I've always taken the stance where sometimes you're just dodging a bullet. You would never want to work with a team like that. And it's wasted energy towards your part. One thing I like about the tech industry, because you don't get this with every industry, but tech industry is pretty inclusive. Like it's pretty progressive in everyone that the tech industry accepts and kind of the push and the direction it's going. It's a very different industry than other ones. Because I was about to go into I made this statement, but I almost quit trying to become a developer. I almost went into the mills in like Northwest Indiana, and it's a very different interview process, a very different feel with a different industry. But yeah, I don't get that vibe from the tech industry at all. Let's see. Asking about the mock interview I met for. How long will this go on for? End date? Oh, I got you. I don't know. I have no idea. Just reach out. Reach out as soon as you can. I wouldn't wait on it.
Yeah, I mean, is this the first one that you've done? Have you done mock interviews before on your channel? Yep.
No. Yes.
Cool. This is almost like a trial run. Like, I don't know, if it goes super well, we could like do another one later on too. Also, I'd love to see like, more backend related or even like mobile, who knows? Could be a cool recurring segment every once in a while.
It could. I know people would really appreciate it. Okay. I think we caught up for the most part. Let's see. Oh, that's a good question. What do you think about collaborating with people in other industries on projects? For example, I was thinking of collaborating with graphic designers to use on my portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, so if you know folks that are trying to break into adjacent fields, definitely, try to get some sort of project together. Um, you know, like an engineer alone cannot make maybe if we're talking like CLI tools or something. But for a more traditional project with like a UI and everything, like it would be a big undertaking to like do it all. So yeah, if you know folks that are trying to break into design, for instance, especially if it's like more like UX and UI focused, I think it could be like you scratch my back, I scratch your situation where they get to put the design aspect of things on their portfolio and maybe think about, like, or rather tell the story of how they like decided on the specific like views and like, the user-centered reasons for making different decisions. Which I have seen on more junior designer folks' portfolios. And then you can talk about how you actually brought it to life as an engineer. And also, I just want to go back and reiterate, you will hold each other accountable because that's just, letting people down is just not fun. So
No.
Yeah. And you kind of get that's the benefit of like, if somebody who's more design focused is like designing it, it just looks better. And then you do them a favor by bringing it to life.
Yeah, that was always my weakness. I don't know how many projects I ditched just because I hated the design. I'm like, no one's going to want to use this. I wish if you have a designer that that's awesome. I wish I knew a designer that could come up with designs because I spent more time like tinkering with the design of the front end than I did actually building out the front end, from what I remember. Let me pull it up. Could you give some examples of cultural fit questions that you've had to answer?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think you can probably help me out here too. But
we'll see.
So I think it's this one's harder because like it's often not like they're asking you like like situational questions. A lot of times the like culture fit part of the interview is more of a conversation where like they ask you about things and it's really like thinking from the interviewer's perspective, it's thinking about it like, could I see this person like working here? And they're almost like the questions are almost like besides the point. And it's really about the conversation. But that said, some of the questions that do come to mind, because you do ask these too. It's like how have you handled a situation where you like didn't agree with a product decision that was being made, and that's maybe not so much a like culture fit interview, but just like thinking about like, okay, would you actually like push back on product if you thought the user experience could be better? Or let's try to think of some other ones because I mean they definitely exist.
You know what I hate is when people will like frame like what is your biggest weakness and people will frame it like it's their strength. Like no, just flat out say what your weakness is. Like tell people like what you've been working on. For me, like for the longest time it was like a constructive feedback. Like I was always really critical of myself. And I would bring this up in interviews, but I was always very critical. So it was being able to constructively take constructive feedback. But how I've just worked with tons of people and eventually it got grounded and I started like really appreciating the feedback. But, that's something I had to work on. I think it's completely okay to mention it. But I think what's important, like with the biggest weakness question is you recognize that you're not perfect and you are able to recognize what you need to improve. That's the most important part about it. And describing like how you're going about improving that quality in yourself. That's huge. If you can self-identify that, like people want employees that can self-identify that don't need to be micromanaged like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And also if you just think about it from the interviewer's perspective too, like if they ask you a question and you just like completely blatantly spin it, they might just be like, I mean, like I'll let it go and it's not going to be like a hard pass after that. But you didn't answer the question. Another one though that came to mind is, and this is why I think these like culture fit questions it's hard to give examples, but I like asking like what's something that the person learned recently that they think is like cool, whether that be like tech related or not. That just gives me a feel for like, are you actually interested in this, which I think is important, especially depending on the role. And usually you can see like, okay, like, do they get excited about like things like, learning, like, at Albert, being an education company, that was one of our core values. So like we put a lot of emphasis on folks that actually valued learning for the sake of learning. So yeah, just asking like, what's something you learn gets you excited, was one of my favorite questions, and just hearing people's like totally like either tech or non-tech related answers. I don't know. You want to, would it be cool if I asked you that, Don, right now? What is something that you learned recently that you're excited about?
That's a really good question. So I've been learning a lot of business stuff, so I got to think back to like tech. But Prisma, huge fan of Prisma, building out kind of like all the models and stuff on the back end. What I found is when I was starting as a developer, I like custom coding everything. I loved it. And then like, because I wanted to learn, I just want to figure out like how things worked. And then as I got a little bit more experience with that, I started getting fascinated with, because I have an entrepreneur side of me, and I started getting fascinated with these frameworks that could spit something out very quickly, where I didn't have to worry about these like minor, deep, like very complex details, and I could focus more on the features. I could focus more on getting a product out. So Prisma allowed me to do that. It brought, GraphQL options into my backend, and I don't have to set up the resolvers and all of that. So that's definitely a recent thing. I love it. I love frameworks like that. If you know of any, let me know. I always am open to learning new frameworks like that. But we'll spit it back to you though. What is something recently that you learned that got you really excited?
Man, I mean, yeah, my answer is so similar to yours, but it's Hasura. And are you familiar with Hasura at all?
Azure or
no, Hasura. It's like Hasura.
No.
Yeah. So it's uncanny because I'm literally like gonna just say what you just said. But yeah, so it's basically, it's a software as a service that lets you very quickly and easily create like APIs. So basically, it's in short, it takes a Postgres database and slaps a UI on top of it, and then gives you a GraphQL API. So you basically just go into, like, instead of having to code this stuff yourself, you just go in there, you like create your tables in the UI, like, you set their types, and then you just start querying the API using GraphQL, and it gives you like, I'd say like 80 to like 90% of all the things that you need. And then you have to like, if you have any like custom logic that doesn't fit within its like little framework, then you have to build those things yourself, but it gives you a way to do that. So like, I don't know, I'm working on a little side project right now. It's mostly just for fun, but not having to write that, like all that server side logic has been absolutely amazing. Can't recommend it enough. Because like you, I also am lazy, and I don't want to do that work over and over again.
I didn't say I was lazy.
Dude, yeah. No, being a lazy developer is, that's where you want to be. Like, don't reinvent the wheel, unless you're learning, in which case,
right,
reinvent the wheel over and over again until the concepts stick. But yeah, like once you get it, that's like, do I really need to like spin all this stuff up myself again?
Yeah, that's exactly the thought process that convinced me to make it easy on myself. All right. Cool. So we have about 15 more minutes. If you guys have any remaining questions, we'll keep going down the list. Interview process with Coinbase. We actually answered that in the beginning of the video. So once we do end the video, you'll be able to, that's actually one of our first questions. So you'll be able to check that out. Okay. So Tunnel. I just started a free code camp. Do you think it's a waste of time? No, free code camp is really good to get started. You want to explore. Like in the beginning, I highly recommend that you figure out what you want to build, things that excite you. Like just think of an application. So like another question was, the next question was, what would be some good portfolio projects? But I think you just need to explore, the types of things that you want to build. Like, do you use Twitter? Have you thought of like your own version of a social media app that you want to build? I mean, do you use like any sort of, I don't know, to-do list manager, email marketing thing for your business, anything like that? Just think about the apps that you already use. And have you thought about like, it would be really cool if this app had this feature, and like go down that route, like explore, like, how would this app even implement a feature like that? Like, would it need a backend? Could I store some of the data on the front end as it's manipulated, or like, and just like try to connect the pieces a little bit. But ultimately, like the app, when you start trying to think about like how you can change apps or build like a slightly different version of the app, and think about like, would I have fun learning how to build something like this, like even a simple version of it? But I think like Free Code Camp is a free resource that helps you explore that, and it helps you kind of just figure out what you want to build. And you can look up, like down the road, you can look up different technologies, different stacks, different frameworks. That'll all come down the road. But I think Free Code Camp allows you to explore just enough to be able to know like what kind of solutions coding actually can solve and what you can build with it. But just try to connect those pieces with your favorite apps, and as you're learning some of the fundamentals. But whether you, as far as like biting the bullet to pay for a boot camp, it's up to you. That's a decision I can't make for you. Dan can't make for you. That's completely up to you. We can't answer that. But explore Free Code Camp. I think it'll get you a little bit closer to that answer. Would you add to that anything different?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a good resource. There's a lot of other good resources online. I almost read this question as like, should I self-teach or go to a boot camp? That's, as you said, that's a decision that, one has to make for themselves, but one costs a lot more money. So, I don't think there's any downside to trying to self-teach for, let's say, like a month or two and seeing if that sticks.
Yeah, that's really, and I think that's really good advice, because I highly recommend people start with the self-taught route initially. Even if you don't think you're going to go down that route until you get a position, it still allows you to learn fundamentals and explore coding and what you want to build. And so without paying, tons of money. So yeah, definitely try the self-taught route, try to solidify that. You can consider the coding bootcamp route and even potentially a CS degree. But my opinion, like start cheap, as cheap as you can, and see if you can be successful with that. All right. Someone going through, what would be, that's a good question. Do you know what, well, I'll read the question then ask. So not interview related, but for someone going through a front end track at Treehouse, what would be a good follow-up path to do afterwards? Do you know what Treehouse is?
That's like the online like learning resource, right?
Yeah.
Are they the ones that have a lot of like pretty awesome videos on YouTube, like multi-hour like courses? Let's see.
Ooh, I don't know about that. They're really good at teaching beginner fundamental concepts, like really good at it. That's what they specialize in.
Yeah, no, okay. I do think I've like watched some of these videos just in like even days. By the way, it's like an ongoing learning. It's super important. So like I'm still watching like tutorials and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, what would be a good follow-up after doing a front-end track that teaches you like the fundamentals? Like, there's build something definitely, but then in terms of like what to build, yeah, like it's kind of like a sliding scale in terms of complexity. So like, how far can you like slide the slider up and still be able to like implement that thing. Can't you've talked about like being stuck in tutorial hell before, right? Like that's like what I want to say, like not to do is, if you just finish doing a thing, don't just jump to the next like follow-up path. Actually apply what you just learned. And then you might find that you actually don't know how to do it all. Like you might not know how to. I don't know what the front end track at Treehouse is, but like, you might want to like persist some data, and this didn't teach you how to like set up a database. I just want to plug that again. Use Hasura. It's incredibly easy to do this. But like, yeah, like then by implementing something, you will know what you don't know, and then go study that. It's like there is no like, I finished this, what do I do next? I think it should be, I finished this, I will apply what I learned, and via that process, I will learn what I need to learn next to be able to like finish a project.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's really good advice. I'm going to go back to what you said in the middle. And I'm just going to say this. If you've completed the front end track at Team Treehouse and you don't have any portfolio projects, you've done it entirely wrong. Like, don't just complete a course and then move on to the next course. Apply it. Think of like a mini little project that will apply the skills that you had just learned. That's your goal. Like, you start building stuff alongside that. And I think when you start building stuff, even Team Treehouse has its limitations. You're probably going to, in the process, think of features that you want to add to your project. And you might just kind of put them aside for now. And that can influence like what articles you look up afterwards, like what courses you look up afterwards. But definitely start building like mini little projects to reinforce what you're learning after each course.
Oh, I just want to go back real quick. And I was actually thinking of Free Code Camp. That's the videos that I always land on. They're so good. I mean, I guess I don't know Treehouse, but yeah, just looking at Free Code Camp's videos on YouTube right now, and they have an 8-long video that's data structures, easy to advanced course. So let's rewind all the way to the beginning, asking about like how to learn data structures. Like, go watch that video, learn what they are, and then implement them yourself. But yeah, actually, one thing that I did want to say in terms of what you just said, thinking about like tutorial as do tutorial, then do project, I would maybe recommend thinking of a project that you're going to do alongside the tutorial. So like, if you can actually apply what you're learning as you learn it, it might be easier to like gain some of that momentum and have that knowledge stick, as opposed to if you did the entire tutorial and then tried building something altogether like at the end, because you might forget some of the things that you learned in the beginning.
Great advice. Okay, so we got about 5 minutes left. Really quick, Donnie says, nice hair, guy in blue. Are you wearing blue? Is that blue? Yeah, it's dark blue.
Oh, I assumed it was you, since... Oh, no, this is black. But yeah, I mean, your background's blue. I don't know who has the nice hair.
I don't know who you're talking about, but thank you. So this is a really good question. Love the channel. I'm a bootcamp student at Flatiron, about to graduate. We did not learn how to write tests, and I'm wondering how important is knowing how to write tests for entry-level developers. What do you think about this?
For entry level, I personally would not make that a requirement. Like, if I was hiring somebody, that's something that I could teach an entry level dev on the job. It's totally up to like the testing library that you're using. There's like different ways to test different things. There's different philosophies. Like, you might learn how to do it one way, and it ends up that we use this other library or this other way of testing. So I think like understanding the general concept might be good to know, but you don't have to like go and like learn the ins and outs in order. So again, like in a person with a like that's making a hiring decision, that's not going to like make or break the candidate. That said, I think this is another one of those things that is, it's in the field. It's something that you will likely be doing. So if you've got some extra time, you've got some, a weekend that you don't have plans for, here's like an example of somebody knowing what they don't know. So it doesn't hurt to go like read up on it. It's, it's fairly, I wanted to say it's fairly straightforward, but I have to be honest, nothing in development is fairly straightforward. This is what's called the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, it seems easy, but because you forget what it was like to not know that thing. So it's not fairly straightforward. It's convoluted and confusing because technology, like, that's just how code is. But I think given a weekend, you could probably like understand the fundamentals. So it wouldn't hurt. It's one of those things where like, if you can prove that you know about it, that's a plus. Not knowing about it, it's not necessarily a minus, but you're competing. It's a competitive edge.
I like it. I have nothing different to say about that. It's really good advice. Okay, so Jonathan says, I think you might have an opinion about this because I feel like we've talked about freelancing before, but would you recommend freelancing to bolster your resume? I'm going to share my experience. I kind of tried it in the beginning. One thing I realized is a couple things to be aware of. Like, most freelancers have insurance. People sue. And like, no one ever thinks about that. But like, if you build an app and all of a sudden it breaks and, people lose sales on that, like those are damages potentially. And like, when you go the freelance route, like, so usually some people will like build something for their family for something cheap or start with like a local business. But my point being, it's great that you're building something that people are paying for and you're providing real value to someone, especially if you're like the website that you build is an upgrade and it's bringing them more sales. Like, that's an awesome thing to shout out on your resume. But you also learn, like, it's a lot of business. I feel like when I was going down the freelancing route and very unsuccessful with it at first, there was so much to learn, and even just like communicating requirements with clients. I did a really bad job of it. So it's something you grow with over time, but you have to learn way more than coding. It feels extra hard to go the freelancing route if you're already like putting a lot of energy into learning coding. That's my personal opinion. Some people like have that entrepreneurship spirit where they're like, screw it. I want this challenge, and that's great. But you have to be aware of, it's not just coding you're learning. It's a lot of business stuff. But what's your opinion on it?
So I guess I'd be curious to know if the person means freelancing to bolster your resume in order to get like a full-time position. And if so, I think that's very like difficult. Like, I think that if you have the skills to be able to freelance successfully, you almost certainly have the skills to be able to be an individual contributor at a company successfully. So I would freelance to make some side money. Like, I don't these days, but I definitely was freelancing in the past, just to like have something else to work on, just because I like keeping busy, and like development is my passion. Also, like having some extra cash is great. But I never thought about it like as a thing to bolster my resume. It was just side income. And again, like, well, even to your point, like, you have to be able to deliver the product, right? Or whatever it is that you're working on. So like, if you can do that successfully, like, you probably should be able to do that successfully at a company too.
Yeah. I usually give a simple recommendation. I feel like most people that are going to be good with freelancing are better off getting that position at a company first and focusing on building up the skills to get hired first and bringing that into freelancing. Because I've known a lot of people that go off individually and still struggle, but at least they have that experience of building production applications. I don't know. Yeah, I'm glad you shared your opinion, but I know a lot of people have different opinions about that. Before I forget, though, real quick, because we're coming up towards about 9:30 right now. So I want to shout out, we are doing a 30-day coding challenge. It's meant to get you out of tutorial hell, get you out of practicing tutorials and doing more courses and doing more tracks and then doing more courses and doing more tracks and getting you out of that loop so we can focus on helping you build out a portfolio project. So if you want to try, especially if you're trying to build out your first portfolio project, join us on Discord, DM me. That challenge starts April 12th and it's going to go to May 12th, but we're inviting people every single day. So if you want to join us, it's kind of just to hold each other accountable and help each other out. We would love to have you. And I'm going to let you shout out this.
Yeah. So one of the things that Don and I are doing is we're going to be getting back together, and I'm going to be going with perhaps one of the folks on the live stream here and doing a mock interview with them. So it's going to be a 1 hour long end-to-end interview from more like culture type questions to actual like vanilla JS, vanilla DOM front end questions to actually putting together a little project. And the idea is that, we want to give somebody the chance to go through the process and so you can like see what it's actually like. So if you're interested in being the candidate, I will be the interviewer. You'll be the interviewee. If you're interested, DM Don on LinkedIn at the link below. And I'm super excited to see how this goes.
I think it'll be a really fun interview. And, I've said this before, but Dan is super friendly. I think you're going to have a lot of fun being interviewed by him. Okay. Yeah. Glad that could help, Jonathan. And Curry, don't worry about it. Just look at the past broadcast and you'll be able to, we answered your question. Someone actually asked it for you. They were kind enough to ask it. So go ahead and watch the past broadcast and you'll be able to get that answer. But everyone will, with the video below, if you wanted to join Discord, join the 30-day challenge, or you want to reach out on LinkedIn, once this broadcast ends, you'll be able to go back to the video, look at it on screen, and then, reach out. So, okay. I've taken so much of Dan's time that he has generously volunteered. It's about an hour and a half, tons of good questions. Everyone, thank you so much for being kind, asking great questions. Feel free to reach out to Dan. Actually, Dan, if they wanted to reach you, where could they reach you?
Yeah, so I feel like LinkedIn would probably be the way to go. What is my?
Yeah, I always forget mine.
Can I chat this to you? Can you post on the?
Yeah,
on the
I'll post
cool.
it.
Yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If you were on this live stream, just write a message that's like live stream or something. I'll accept you. And then apologies if I'm not like super quick to respond, but I'll definitely try my best.
Yeah, definitely connect with him. He's a great guy to get to know, but I can drop it in chat as well. Sometimes it'll go through some chats it won't. Nice. But yeah, awesome. Well, seriously, everyone, thanks so much for doing this. I think, does everyone kind of enjoy, let me know in the comments below, but does everyone kind of enjoy me inviting guests on? It seems that way. I've got a few requests, but I'm not 100% sure, but hopefully you enjoyed this. Dan is a friend of mine. I always enjoyed talking with them. I loved working with them. Hopefully one day we get to work together again, but yeah, seriously, Dan, thanks for hopping on. This was fun.
Yeah, no, this was great. And yeah, thanks everybody for all the questions. This was super enjoyable. And best of luck to absolutely everybody that's, trying to break into the field. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of passion, but if you put those two things in, you'll definitely see results.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if you haven't already, definitely follow or subscribe wherever you're watching this. And we will do this every Friday. We might do it in the evening. We might do it in the afternoon. I'm still figuring out the time, but I kind of invite different guests on. I'm probably going to start doing that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you next Friday. Take care, everyone. And stick around, Dan, just for a couple minutes.